Yeah, I bet Brittany Griner would love to hear that song right now.
Well, hello.
So, welcome back to another episode of the Scuttlebutt Podcast. I'm here with my co-host Chaps and Lieutenant Gill. How you guys doing today?
Hoorah, sir.
Good to be
So,
here.
um, I've been super excited about this interview all week. But before we get started, I gotta give my spiel about our nonprofit. As you all know, we have turned this podcast and also my sports podcast and Sunday mornings. We turn it into a nonprofit because we are out there trying to combat the atrocity of veteran suicide. So our goal is to take and veterans and first responders to uh, NFL games, NHL games, MLB games, NBA games. Take them out,
Soccer,
enjoy
hockey.
soccer, yeah, whatever you're into. Take them out, send them with a mentor. Not just pay for their ticket, but also send them with a mentor. Pay for their entire evening, parking, dinner, whatever we can do. And the website is in the works. It's coming soon, and I have a meeting on Tuesday with some fundraising. So there's links down in the description for donations. You can do one-time donations. You can join our Patreon. Do whatever you got to do. Uh, we're out here for a good cause.
Yes, sir.
With that said, we have Lieutenant Gill. How you doing today, sir?
Great. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Hoorah, Lieutenant.
So before we get into your story, which you have a phenomenal story, you ejected out of a fighter jet going roughly 700 miles an hour.
Jesus.
Correct.
And damn. So
Wow, that's fast.
I know a little bit of your story
That's
because
fast.
I've been following you on Instagram and I listened to Wiz's podcasts. Before we get into the ejection, and I want to start from day one, like high school. Like when you were in high school, did you know you wanted to be a naval aviator?
Aviator. Come on, say it
Aviator.
right. Aviator.
Yeah.
You
It's a
know,
tongue twister.
Yes.
uh, when I was younger, I got to go out flying. My parents had a friend who had a little Cessna, and I got to go out flying. And then they enrolled me. Our community college had a little program for kids where you could go and spend a week doing ground school, and you got to go up and fly a little bit in just a little Cessna. And that kind of stuck with me when I was little, and I really enjoyed it. And as I went through high school, I didn't really have anything else that I got that interested in. So when I graduated high school, there was a small flight school at the community college right where I grew up in Traverse City called Northwestern Michigan College. And they had a really good flight program for a fraction of the price of what you'd have to pay to go to a lot of universities. And so I decided to start going and I got my private, my instrument rating, my commercial. And before long, I was a flight instructor. And so I was flight instructing while I was still finishing college and got my degree. And I flew corporate for about a year after I finished college. Nice. And it was a good gig. I got to fly all over the country, largely single pilot in a brand new aircraft, kind of exposure to the corporate world, which, was pretty cushy and good. Got to eat a lot of really nice meals and drink good wine. And it was a nice lifestyle, but I was kind of wanting more in life. And up to that point, I always had heard of the Navy and flying for the Navy, and I always thought that was awesome. I saw the Blue Angels used to come up to Traverse City all the time when I was a kid, but I never thought that was something that I could possibly do. I thought you had to, be born and bred for that and have gone to the Naval Academy and your dad's got to be an admiral or something.
Right.
I just didn't know how it worked really. I even had a really good professor in college who was, like a heroic naval aviator. He was a Huey gunship pilot back in the Vietnam era. He was part of the Sea Wolves, which was a special forces helicopter rescue. He helped stand that unit up. And then he was a test pilot that was involved in all sorts of crazy crashes. And he was a bush pilot. So he's just this incredible guy. But I never really asked him, like, how do you become a naval aviator, which I should have. But anyways, my friend Mark was actually putting in a package to go to Navy OCS to be a pilot. And I was like, you can do that? I thought you had to go to the Naval Academy, and I just didn't know. He's like, no, man, go on the site. It's called airwarriors.com. There's a bunch of aviators on there, and you can read all these forums. And I did that, and I spent like a couple weeks just really learning everything I could about it, and realized like this is like right in my wheelhouse. I've got my degree. I can go right in. I've got flight time, and I put in a package, and before I knew it, I got picked up to go to OCS.
Nice.
So how old were you when you went into OCS?
Let's see, that would have been in 2009. So I was in my early 20s.
Okay. So is OCS a lot like regular boot camp for enlisted, or are they screaming at you and just treating you like a dick?
Yep. I think it's pretty much out of the same playbook. You've got a bunch of Marine drill instructors yelling at you.
That's right.
You've got some Navy chiefs yelling at you.
Boo! Boo! Bad chiefs. Bad chiefs.
I mean, you're doing rifle drilling. You're doing a lot of PT, running around, getting yelled at. You do academics, and as you kind of progress through it, like the yelling eases off a little bit, and the academics ramp up more. And but yeah, it's 3 months of vacation basically.
When I think of that, like I think of Officer and a Gentleman.
Yeah.
Like Richard Gere, like he goes through the
like
tent.
that.
Nothing like that. Oh man,
no, man,
come on.
There's zero karate, which I would have been all about karate. There were no like dining out with beautiful women and date nights. No, like,
damn it.
None of the cool stuff that's in that movie is real.
So when you're in OCS, at what point do they select you to go to like surface warfare or aviation or?
So for officer candidate school, I applied specifically just for a pilot slot. Now that didn't mean I was going to just automatically become a pilot, but I still had to go through all the medical stuff. I still had to make it through all the training. But when I signed up, I just signed up for that because that's what I wanted to do. And that's what I signed up to do. And for me, it was kind of like, if I don't make it for some reason for medical or whatever, I was kind of like, I'm out, I'll do something different. But I really signed up to be a pilot because that's where my heart was at.
So, at what point do they decide what plane you're going to fly?
So after officer candidate school, which was about 3 months, you get your commission, and I went down to Pensacola, Florida, and that's where I did about a month of what's called API, Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination. It's largely a lot of ground school. You do a little bit of survival training. You get to swim a mile in your flight suit and boots in the pool. And so, there's all sorts of fun activities. And then after that, I headed to Corpus Christi, Texas, to VT-28 Rangers, where I did what's called primary flight training. That's where I flew the T-34 Charlie Turbo Mentor. It's a high performance, fully aerobatic turbine prop aircraft. So coming from the civilian side of the house, it was a pretty high performance aircraft. And that's basically what they throw guys right into from the get-go. And I did well there. My prior flight experience definitely helped out in a lot of ways. In some ways, it was a challenge because I had to relearn things I already knew, but had to do it the Navy way. Plus, there's just a ton of memorization and some moderate hazing as well to make it through. But
hazing is always a part of it. Always.
Oh yeah,
always.
It's probably for good reason.
Yeah,
you need to have a thick skin going into that kind of profession, and they do a good job of developing that.
When do they teach you how to land on an aircraft carrier? Is that during that school?
No. So after you graduate primary, depending on if you're in the top 50% of your class, you can put down tailhook aircraft. And so I did pretty well in my class. I was able to select what I wanted. Granted, you put down a dream sheet, and if the Navy that week's like, nope, everybody's going to go fly P3s or everybody's going to go fly helicopters, and that's what you get. There is definitely luck of the draw. But the week I selected, I got a tailhook slot, and then I went down to Kingsville, Texas, to VT-22, the Eagles, and I flew the T-45 Charlie Goshawk. It's a single engine jet. It's pretty sporty. They paint it in orange and white, so it's affectionately known as the clown jet. And once you're about about most of the way through the training in that aircraft is the first time you get to go to the aircraft carrier, and you land on the aircraft carrier in the daytime. And the first time you do it, you're all by yourself. There's nobody in the back to save you if you screw it up. So, it's kind of figure it out. And I graduated that training. I selected the F-18 Super Hornet, and that's when I went to VFA 106, the Gladiators, which is at Naval Air Station Oceana in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Yeah.
And that's where I underwent 1 year training, what's called the RAG, or they call it the FRS now. But I kind of like the sound of the RAG.
RAG.
It's pretty hard. You get treated like a RAG while you're there. Like, it's extremely intense academically. And, basically every flight, the expectations are sky high, from your brief to the knowledge, to just, oh yeah.
I have a question, sir. Should be a parade rest. I'm sorry. I have to ask, why Smurf? You got to tell us that story, man. You got to tell us that story.
Yeah. So I made it through flight training. I made it through the F-18 training, and I went to VFA 143, the Pukin Dogs, which is at NAS.
Pukin Dogs.
Awesome.
And
awesome names.
I was flying the F-18 Echo Super Hornet, which is a single seat variant of the Super Hornet. And I had been in my squadron just shy of a year. So I was no longer the new guy, but I was definitely still learning a ton. Every day was, they like to say, drinking out of a fire hose, because there's just so much to learn, and you have to know it. It's such a deep level. You're not just sitting down at a computer and clicking a screen to take a test. Like, you have to know these things inside and out, and then be able to apply it in a real life situation, traveling at the speed of sound. So it's extremely dynamic. They call it the jack of all trades, master of none, because in the Super Hornet, we do a little bit of everything, where, there's a lot of squadrons that focus on one thing, whether it's air to air or air to ground. They kind of have like a niche thing where they can really focus in. But in the Super Hornet, you're constantly learning everything from air to ground, close air support, standoff weapons, maritime employment. You're doing electronic attacks sometimes. You're doing air to air combat maneuvering. And by the way, you got to land on the aircraft carrier and do all the boat ops. So, there's just a ton of things to know. And so I was finally at the point at that, at about a year mark, I was starting to feel somewhat comfortable. Not that I was, I didn't make it yet. I was still a dumb new guy, kind of, in a lot of ways. But, I was starting to finally feel comfortable. And I was actually, I had been in the squadron for that long, and they still hadn't come up with a call sign for me. The other guys that had joined at the same time as I did already had call signs. And actually the day of this flight, which is January 15th, 2014, one of the more senior junior officers, one of the more senior younger pilots in the squadron, came up to me and he said, you just haven't done anything dumb enough yet to earn a call sign. And I think that might have jinxed me for that day. And also my friend Fisty was standing duty that day, and he had put up, to lighten the mood of the squadron, which is important just because it's typically a pretty high stress environment. And he had looked up on his phone, he got the Shark Tracker app, and he had put up all the positions of all these big GPS tagged sharks that were out in the Atlantic Ocean underneath the working area we were going to be operating in that day. And so right before I went on my flight, Fisty's like, hey, don't eject today. There's a 16-foot, 3,500-pound great white shark named Mary Lee directly underneath the working area we're going to be flying in today. And so that was comforting. It was January, so we had a really unseasonably cold winter at that point. The buoy temperature nearby where we were going to be operating was 37 degrees Fahrenheit water temperature with below freezing air temperatures. So we were wearing dry suits. But went out for the flight, got to do some air-to-air refueling, and then got to go practice some air combat maneuvering, also known as basic fighter maneuvering, or BFM is what we commonly call it. And that's what a lot of people might call dogfighting. So it's trying to shoot down another jet within the visual arena. and it is a lot of fun. It was one of my favorite things to do. It's dynamic. You're pulling a lot of G, so it's very physical. You know, I was a short guy. I was about 180 pounds and 5'7", so I was just short and stocky, and I could handle G's really well. And so I loved it. You know, there's a lot. I mean, it's like playing chess, jazz piano, and wrestling and driving in traffic all at the same time. It's like there's just a ton going on. And I had just gotten qualified with my JHEMIX helmet, which is the Joint Helmet Mounted Cueing System. And it's a large helmet that basically allows you to see all of your weapon displays wherever you turn your head. So you can use it in a cast scenario, close air support, when you're looking on the ground, and you can designate based on where you're looking. And then in an air-to-air environment, you can actually like look over your shoulder and potentially designate somebody.
No way.
So it's a really cool system. But just like any new piece of gear, especially one that complex, it takes some time to get in the habit patterns and really get used to it. And so I was still at a point where it was just taking just a split second extra of my brain power and distracting me a little bit from my habit patterns. And anyways, we did several sets of BFM, which is like, you know, a round in fighting. We fought until somebody was getting their ass kicked, which was typically me, because I was fighting my skipper that day, who had been doing it for damn near 20 years. So he was extremely proficient. He was a Top Gun graduate, and he really knew his stuff. So, you know, it was like stepping into the ring with Mike Tyson and just getting my ass kicked. But that's kind of the way the Navy does its training, you know, and the military in general in a lot of ways. But you know, the sets had gone well. Like, there wasn't anything big other than just me getting my ass kicked, really. And we set up for that last set of the day. We were almost out of fuel. We set up a little lower and a little faster than we typically do, but no big deal. Shouldn't have been an issue. And he called 3, 2, 1, fights on. I selected afterburner and I pitched in, and I'm using that helmet and I'm looking outside. I'm under a lot of G, so I'm straining my body, and I'm trying to get a weapons acquisition on him so I can potentially shoot him a simulated missile before we get too close. And I don't get a shot off. We come to the merge, which you can think of it like two medieval knights jousting at one another at the speed of sound. And we're just come flying in really close to each other and blast by one another. And he goes behind me, and I look behind, and I'm already partially inverted. I roll the jet all the way upside down, and I start pulling. And because I'm kind of focused on looking outside, I didn't realize how fast I had gotten in just those few seconds from the fights on. And I would have been all right, but as the jet came through, kind of bullseye nose low, so I did what's called the split S maneuver, which is basically I had rolled inverted and pulled the aircraft down at the ocean, and I was trying to dive the jet down before I came back up to try to shoot my adversary at that point. And as the jet came basically bullseye nose low, it had gotten so fast in what's called the transonic region, which is right before you break the speed of sound. And it had put in an override to my control inputs. So I had the stick in my laps. I was pulling 7.5 Gs. So, you know, just for rough math, my head and that helmet combined weighed about 20 pounds. Damn. So at roughly 8 Gs, there's basically 160 pounds of force on my head that I'm holding up with my neck as I look out trying to acquire my adversary and shoot him. And so I felt all that force, and then all of a sudden, while I'm looking outside, I just felt the aircraft ease up. So it was like going around a sharp corner in a sports car and then having the steering wheel kick back halfway. So I went from a 7.5 G pull down to about a 4 G turn. And that was a massive difference in turn performance. And if you were in a car, you would just probably skid off the road. In this case, I was just flying right at the ocean. And I only had a few seconds to figure out what was going on. At the time, I didn't realize everything I'm telling you now, but I just felt the aircraft settle. I had the stick in my lap. It was not doing what I was telling it to do. I was just a voting member in the flight control system at that point. I was pulling for all I was worth, and before I knew it, the ground rush was just extreme as the ocean came rushing up at me. And I knew it was either eject or I was going to die. And in a split second, I reached down between my legs and pulled the black and yellow cable, the ejection handle. And a normal ejection is pretty violent. It'll, guys get flail injuries from their arms flailing around. Typically, guys
Right.
will lose some of their stature just from that force of that rocket igniting under your ass is so forceful that it compresses your spine. Fortunately, I was short and stocky with a wrestler neck, and that kind of helped hold me together as I hit that ejection. And then immediately as I came out of the cockpit, I was blasted with, the sound barrier. Essentially, I collided with the sound barrier with my body,
God.
and I ejected at 2,000 feet, which was 2 seconds before I would have impacted the water had I stayed with the jet.
Damn.
I was at 51 degrees nose low, so in a very steep dive, and I was going 695 miles per hour, which is in the aircraft, it's 604 knots indicated airspeed, or 0.95 indicated Mach number, so 95% the speed of sound.
Damn.
And which is, right at the sound barrier. And as I hit that, it ripped that helmet off my head, smashed my head, giving me a severe traumatic brain injury. I broke my neck. I broke my left shoulder. I broke both my upper arms. My right humerus and my right arm tore through my right brachial artery. So I was bleeding out pretty profusely through that artery. My left forearm shattered in multiple places, shattering the radius and ulna, severed my median nerve, had brachial plexus injury, which is sort of the nerve group that controls everything to your shoulders and upper body in a lot of ways. Both my legs were flailing around so violently that the steel-toed boots on my feet essentially became like maces and were just smashing into my legs. And as they broke, they just flailed more violently, smashing my tib fib open on my lower legs with open fractures. I lost chunks of my bone.
Were you awake for all this?
So I have retrograde amnesia from a lot of it. I have little clips and memories that I can remember. Fortunately, probably, I don't remember a lot of it, but I've been able to recreate everything that's happened from the flight data recorder, the black box that came out, from the people that were on scene, the rescue crews. Everybody was able to kind of recreate what happened.
Right.
And so I've been able to create a pretty accurate depiction of what exactly went down. And so, within a second or two of being under my parachute, I impacted that ice cold water, and 37-degree Fahrenheit water on your body feels like needles going into your skin. And when your head goes under it, it's like severe brain freeze. And, that parachute that had just saved my life started to sink under the rough ocean current and pull me under. And if you've ever been held under by a wave, or when you want to get a breath of air, that awful feeling when you just need a breath and you can't get one. And that's where I hung out for about an hour and a half, just getting teabagged by that parachute. I had ejected so fast that most of the survival gear on my vest shredded off. My beacon malfunctioned, so there was no beacon sending off my location. My dry chute just shredded open, and it was filled up with cold seawater. And the two devices that connect my parachute to my harness, called a seawers, malfunctioned. What it's supposed to do, because upper body injuries are so common in jet ejections from the flailing of your arms, like a rag doll, essentially. They put a system onto the harness to disconnect your parachute automatically as soon as it goes into salt water. As soon as it's in the water, it detects it, and it sets off a little explosive that sets you free from your parachute. For whatever reason, one of them fired but didn't disconnect, and the other one didn't even fire. So both my parachute risers were still attached, and that's what allowed the parachute to continue to pull me under. Meanwhile, I'm bleeding out, and I know that there's a 16-foot great white shark right underneath me.
Jesus.
So it was kind of like, worst case scenario in a lot of ways. Luckily, my skipper saw me go down. He got down low and dropped a mark, so he had my an accurate GPS location. However, I was in the ocean, and I was getting drug around by that parachute, so I was moving.
Right.
He was able to get over to a fishing vessel that was nearby, and he went down and thumped him, which means he got really low and really fast and flew right over their bow to get their attention. And then they switched up maritime guard, and he was able to coordinate where I was at and get that fishing boat coming back to my position. They weren't really able to help me a whole lot, but they at least provided a visual reference point for the rest of the rescue effort. In the meantime, my skipper also coordinated with air traffic control as the on-scene commander. He was almost out of gas at this point, so he had hand off the on-scene commander job to another aircraft that was overhead, and air traffic control did an excellent job of coordinating these things. And in the meantime, I'm just getting drug around by this parachute, and it took about an hour and a half. 2 Navy H-60 Seahawk helicopters arrived. The first one couldn't get my position. However, the second helicopter that arrived from HSC 28, they were able to get eyes on. Initially, their pilot spotted me. They flew their helicopter right over me, and then a rescue swimmer named Cheech jumped in the water and got down with me. And he said he hooked onto my harness. We've got a titanium D-ring that you can hook into. And he said as soon as he hooked in, that parachute pulled both of us deep underwater. And he said he remembered his training in the pool where he would look underneath the water and getting drug around. And he was always used to just seeing the bottom of the pool, which was kind of comforting. But on this day, when he got yanked under, all he could see below us was just the dark blue abyss of the ocean. And but his training kicked in, and he whipped out his knife. He was able to cut me free from all the paracord and get me back up to the surface and back into the helicopter. He said the ride to the hospital was about 45 minutes, but for him, it felt like almost 5 hours because I was continually coding. I would black out. They thought I was dying. They would resuscitate me, get me back. I would sit up. I would just start screaming, help, help, help. And then I would black out again. And that just continued over and over for the whole ride. And they got me back to Norfolk General, which is a level 1 trauma center. And fortunately, they had the dream team surgical team on that day. They initially treated me for hypothermia. My core body temperature at the hospital was 87 degrees Fahrenheit. So I should have been dead from hypothermia. However, had I not had hypothermia, had my dry suit actually functioned properly, I would have bled to death long before the helicopter showed up. So it was just a wild twist of fate. The hypothermia almost killed me, but it actually kept me alive long enough to get to the hospital. They treated me for hypothermia. They treated me for kidney failure. My kidneys were just overwhelmed with all the muscle and tissue damage and failing. So, they put me on dialysis. They were treating me for hypothermia. And once they got me stable enough, they put me into an induced coma. And that's where I underwent over a dozen surgeries over the next week. They had to do a brachial artery repair with a vein graft. I had fasciotomies on all 4 extremities for compartment syndrome to prevent them from having to amputate all my extremities. They rebuilt my skeleton with titanium rods, screws, steel plates. And so now if you see my x-ray, I look like Wolverine, basically.
I was just about to say Wolverine, man. I was just about to say that.
Anyways, after a week, they were trying to get me out of the coma, and I wasn't coming to. And so to get back to your question about, I know this has been a long way about.
No. Hey, dude, this has been an unreal story. Holy shit.
For real.
A lot of my squadron mates are at the hospital, and they're waiting to find out what's going to happen. At this point, they don't know if I'm going to live. They don't know if I'm going to be a vegetable. My family's all there, and the mood is pretty depressing. It sounds like from people's stories that I talked to. And Basil, that same senior JO that said I hadn't done anything stupid enough yet to earn a call sign, he's like, he's a scrappy motherfucker. He'll be all right. And it kind of lifted the mood of the room, and people were laughing. And because it's the Navy, you have to have a politically correct cover story. They couldn't just say scrappy motherfucker. So they shortened it down to SMurF, which is sort of a makeshift acronym for scrappy motherfucker. And then they made up a cover story, which is I'm a short guy who turned blue from hypothermia, which is why I'm Smurf officially. But Smurf it was, and I spent 2 weeks in total in a coma, and one day the lights just started coming back on. And as I came to, I had no idea how I had gotten there, where I was. I had no idea I was in an ejection. A combination of the brain injury and the massive amount of drugs that they had me on, I was just out of it. I mean, I was on fentanyl and Dilaudid and oxycodone and OxyContin, amitriptyline and tramadol, trazodone.
Oh,
Like
Jesus.
the list goes on of all the stuff they were pumping me full of for pain management largely. And but I kind of came to, and I remember hearing people's voices. And one of the first things I remember was I could look around and see familiar faces. And I wanted to sit up and get up, but I couldn't move. And I thought the little thin wool blanket that was over me was made of lead or something, because I just couldn't budge it. But it was because I was paralyzed. And
Oh, man.
I just couldn't move. Between the neck injury plus all the extremity injuries, nothing was responding. You know, I was telling myself to move, I just couldn't. And little by little, you know, I spent a couple weeks in the ICU. Things started to come back a little bit. I was really out of it from the head injury. My humor was way off. I was making just really inappropriate, humorous remarks that I thought were hilarious, but were pretty embarrassing for some people around me. They're like, "Oh man, he's not quite right," which is common with head injuries.
Right.
But little by little, like things started to come back a little bit. It took a long time. Originally, the doctors and medical staff told me I was never going to walk again. I was never going to use my arms. My flying career was over, and to just kind of get used to my new life as a paralyzed person. And in my mind, I was like, I'm going to prove you all wrong. And I don't want to be stuck like this. I'm going to work my ass off to do what I can to get better. And little by little, you know, it started with just trying to scoot around on my bed. At this point, I'm, you know, crapping myself. Corpsmen are having to clean me off. Is pretty miserable. But little by little, I was able to start scooting around on the bed. And after a few weeks, I could scoot down to the bottom of the bed and sit up. And I got good enough where they were able to send me to the Poly Trauma Center in Richmond, Virginia, at the Richmond VA Hospital, which is a place that was a specialty location for military members with severe injuries. And so there were other guys there. There was an EOD from the SEAL team whose parachute had a malfunction, and he had crashed into the ground after falling several hundred feet, who just shattered his pelvis and his legs and had all sorts of internal organ damage. There are guys that had gotten hit by RPGs and IEDs, was probably the most common injury. Anyways, a lot of just incredible human beings there. The staff was excellent. You know, it was therapy all day, every day. From you wake up in the morning and it's occupational therapy, speech therapy, vision therapy, kinesiotherapy, physical therapy, you name it, like all day, every day. And the staff was excellent. They had a lot of good equipment. The wing had just been redone, so it was very clean with fresh paint on the walls, and every room had a TV in it. So, you know, compared to what guys were coming back in the Vietnam era to the VA,
Right.
it was a massive improvement. However, there's definitely some room for improvement. The food was just abysmal. They prepared the food about an hour and a half away in Hampton Roads, load it up into metal boxes, and then drive it all the way to Virginia or to Richmond. So by the time you're getting it's this reheated stuff that's been sitting around for an hour and a half. That's just, to begin with, it was just overly processed, just garbage food with no flavor. And, you know, they're spending all this money and all these other things there. And, but they're just
build a damn kitchen.
They're not putting any money into the nutrition of the people there, which that's the most foundational thing. If your body's going to heal, is getting some sleep and getting some good food. And you can't get rest either, because you get woke up all night to take drugs and get your vitals checked. So the sleep was bad. The food was bad. And fortunately, that was more motivation to get the hell out of there in a lot of ways. After 3 months of rehabilitation, I was able to walk around using a walker, and I went back to Virginia Beach and started doing outpatient therapy at Naval Hospital Portsmouth. And little by little, I got better and better. I had to go through some more surgeries, one of which I had a really terrible hospital experience of going through withdrawals when I had to stay overnight and didn't get my medication. Plus, it was in short, it was a shit show. But got through that. I weaned myself off all the pain medications. I spent months going through withdrawals, and that was pretty unpleasant. After 2 years, though, my friends had got me back out surfing again. They got me out mountain biking, and I was really coming back. And before long, I could max out the Navy PRT again. And I was really coming back, and people saw it. And I was mentally, my function seemed a lot better. Physically, I was running circles around a lot of the people I was at the command, literally. And they got me back flying Super Hornets.
Damn.
And I went back. I went back to VFA 106. I went back through the RAG course there and got requalified in the Super Hornet. And I was stationed with VFA 136 Nighthawks out in the north.
Nighthawks, yeah, I've heard of those guys before.
Yeah, and it was like I had really overcome it all, and I thought I was going to go.
Okay, nobody better complain. Nobody better.
Exactly.
After this story, I don't want to hear any complaints from anybody.
And
dude, that's amazing, sir.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, thanks. I was pretty excited to be back, and I had a massive amount of support, friendship. The whole strike fighter community really rose up and was supportive, and kind of kept me going along the way when things got hard. And I was back flying, and I was actually I was down at Tyndall Air Force Base doing a weapons exercise in what's called NWESUP, which is a live weapons fire exercise where you get to fire. In my case, I got to fire a live AIM-9 Mike Sidewinder, which is a heat-seeking air-to-air missile. I got to shoot that at a drone. I went out for the flight. I shot at the drone, and then I got to go do what's called dissimilar air combat training, which is basically dogfighting another kind of aircraft from a different branch. So I got to fight an F-22 Raptor from the Hawaiian Raptor Squadron that is based out in Oahu, who happened to be there at the same time as us. And so that was incredible. I remember fighting the Raptor and getting to see the way that thing moved like an alien spacecraft. And I came back from the flight, and the debrief, I was watching my tapes, and I remember fighting the Raptor pretty vividly, but I couldn't remember almost everything from the weapon shoot. And so I was pretty concerned, like I shouldn't be blanking on that much. And I went back to the hotel room that night I was staying at and tried to get some sleep. I couldn't sleep. The next day, fortunately, I was just on duty. So I was, running the flight schedule and answering phones and things like that. And I just kind of toughed it out through the day, but I just kept getting worse and worse. And that night I got back and I couldn't do the math to set my alarm on my phone for the time I needed to get up the next day for my flight. I remember sitting down and feeling like the floor was pulsing under me and just getting a tremendous amount of vertigo. I started getting kind of panicked. I couldn't sleep. And that was, at the time, there had been a rash of decompression sickness issues in the Super Hornet. There'd been an issue with the pressurization systems malfunctioning and causing rapid fluctuations in cabin pressure. And people who are scuba divers are probably familiar with the bends and decompression sickness.
Yeah. Yep. He's a scuba diver.
I'm a scuba diver, and yeah, I know that feeling.
So if you get those little bubbles in your joints, it's type 1 DCS. It's painful. They call it the bends. But if you get one of those little nitrogen bubbles forming in your brain, it's a lot more serious. It can cause essentially like an aneurysm or a stroke-like symptoms where you lose mental function. It can even kill you.
Yep.
Anyways, I thought maybe that's what I had going on. And so I contacted the safety officer in the squadron, Squeezer. He loaded me up in a rental car and drove me to Navy Mayport Dive Base, which was only 20 minutes away, fortunately. And they had a hyperbaric chamber. they put me in the hyperbaric chamber, squeezed me, and I spent about 3.5 hours in there. And my symptoms improved drastically while I was in there. I went from this kind of like zombie mode state I was in. I started getting my sense of humor back. I started smiling again and being more like myself. And the next day I went in to see the doc, and he's like, maybe you had decompression sickness, but considering the complexity of your medical case, and I had a stack of medical waivers to be back flying, he's like, I recommend you go talk to the medical staff when you get back to Lemoore and maybe investigate this a little more, which, is the last thing I want to have to do after going through all that medical. But thought about it on the ride home. Once we got back to Lemoore, I was kind of like, I don't want to hurt somebody because I ignore this and it gets worse. And I end up on a flight where I just black out or something worse happens and I hurt somebody or worse, hurt multiple people, crash a jet, kill myself, So I went into medical, and before long I had a diagnosis of delayed onset PTSD. Retrospectively, I wish they put more focus into the brain injury component, because I think that has been largely a contributor. I'm sure there's some PTSD mixed in there, but anyways, the focus was just primarily on PTSD, and they started doing all these clinical therapies, which were not really helpful. And before long, they had me on more medication, which I really didn't want to do. I was resistant to as much as it could be, but that was the only answer that they gave me. It was, here, you got to just take these meds. Yeah, go ahead.
What kind of modalities did they make you do? Like CBT,
Yep.
EMDR,
Yep.
exposure therapy, all
Yep.
that kind of stuff?
Exactly. I did all
Yeah.
those traditional therapies initially,
Yep.
along with the pharmaceutical treatment. And little by little, I started getting worse. They put me on a drug called Seroquel or quetiapine to help me sleep, actually. It can help with severe insomnia. And after a little bit of being on that drug, I started to go into psychoses. So it was like I was awake, but I couldn't distinguish between my imagination and my reality. And things
Zombies.
got really weird. I mean, at times it was really exciting. I thought my wife was a secret agent sent to save me. Other times I thought I was being hunted by the government. At a certain point, I was afraid to drink water or eat any food because I thought I was being poisoned. And there was even a trip to the commissary with my wife when I was in a psychosis where I thought everybody was a demon that was in there. They had these big black eyes and sharp teeth. And everybody we walked by in the commissary, who I'm sure was just a regular service member trying to get some milk, looked to me like they were this demon, like scowling at me. And we went through the checkout, and I was just kind of freaking out. The checkout woman reached up, which I would assume was, she was just saying hello. But in my head, it looked like she was reaching out to try to suck my soul out of me. And as my wife drove us off base, I looked back, and it looked like the entire part of NAS Lemoore was hovering up in the air and had ripped out of the ground. And there was broken rebar and boulders falling out of the bottom. And below it was just this black pit to what looked like the pit to hell to me. And so, this is the mental state I was in. And before long, it became pretty clear I probably wasn't going to get to go back and fly. Retrospectively, I think that we could have taken some different treatment options to focus on the brain injury piece that largely was ignored. And anyways, I was medically retired. I spent 2 years going through a medical board, which was a miserable process, to say the least. Even with the support of my command, support of the medical community, with extensive medical records, it was still, like pulling teeth trying to get through that process. I ended up having to appeal my case. I had to get dressed up in my dress white uniform, fly out to Washington, D.C., and go up in front of a board of appeals, which fortunately ruled in my favor once they were able to see me in person and review everything. But it was a long, drawn-out process that was pretty depressing. And throughout that time, I got really depressed. I got to the point where I was ready to off myself. I mean, I kept a Glock 19 in my in table by my bed. And one night I was just in and out of these psychoses, depressed and miserable. And all I wanted to do was just put that pistol in my mouth. And I started wondering, you know, what's the barrel going to taste like? What's that Hops number 9 gun oil going to taste like in my mouth? What's the barrel going to feel like on my teeth? And the only thing that stopped me is my newborn son and my wife were laying right next to me in bed, and I didn't want to wake them up, and I didn't want them to hear a gunshot and wake them up. That was the only reason I didn't shoot myself that night. But eventually I was medically retired. I moved back to Northern Michigan with my wife and my son, and they continued the Seroquel treatment. And that was largely the only option. It was, here, take your drugs. And when they weren't working, it was because I just needed more of them, they'd say. And before long, they actually had just upped my dose to 450 milligrams of quetiapine or Seroquel.
Damn.
And within 2 days, my wife found me. I had shaved off almost all of my hair in chunks. I had shaved off my eyebrows, my facial hair, and I was completely naked, except I was wearing a black plastic garbage bag draped around my shoulders. And I was about to go out into the Michigan February weather and fight crime because I thought I was a superhero. So my wife called the VA. The VA called the police. And before long, a squad car pulled up in front of our house. The officer was going to put me in the back of the car and drive me to the emergency room. But my wife saw that and she's like, there's no way you're going to put him in a cop car alone in this state. So she loaded up our little boy at this point. I think he's just over 1 year old, and drove me to the emergency room in Traverse City, about an hour away from where we live. And I got there, almost got arrested going in there because, you know, I was just out of my mind and I was peeing on one of the plants in the waiting room, which they didn't appreciate a whole lot, understandably. But I got admitted into a big plexiglass room, and that's where I was just completely out of my mind. I mean, in my mind, I was traveling through space and time. I was watching the TV, and in the TV, I saw every channel I flicked was going further into the future. And I saw this dystopian future where basically Jeff Bezos had taken over the world and everybody was addicted to his stuff and everybody had these big, crazy grins. And anyways, it was wild. My mom came in to visit me, and she said when she found me, I was feeding crumbs to a monster that I thought lived underneath the wall. And then I would sit up with the remote at the TV and I would click it. There was nothing but static on the TV. And I was just going, do you see that? Do you see that? Do you see that? Because to me, I was seeing every time I clicked the remote, I was going further into the future. And it was like I could see into the future. But to my mom, it was just devastating. She saw her once thriving son just completely out of his mind. Once they stabilized me there, I was driven by ambulance down to the Battle Creek VA hospital. And I was put into an inpatient psych facility there at the Battle Creek VA. And it took a while. I started to kind of come to. And I remember when I first came to, I thought I was in a prison cell. But little by little, I started to get a little more lucid. And the answer there was just more drugs. It was, here, take more drugs. That's what you got to have. Again, the food was abysmal. All I needed really was some good sleep, some exercise, some fresh air, some decent food. And there was none of that there. You were confined in the small wing of the place. You were lucky if you got to go outside once a week into a concrete little yard they had fenced off. The food was equally bad, if not worse, than the Richmond Polytrauma VA. And a lot of the staff was really helpful and great, but there were also members of the staff that were there for the wrong reasons, that were enjoying their authority. And if you've ever heard of the Stanford prison experiment, where, you know, somebody gets put in position of authority over somebody who's supposed to be like a prisoner, essentially, there were people that were treating a lot of us in there like, and these are all veterans. These are all military veterans going through the hardest time of their life, basically at rock bottom. And we're getting treated like prisoners. And some of the guys in there, because of their struggles with mental health, have been in and out of prison for multiple reasons. And every one of them that had been to federal prison said, we would way rather be in federal prison than in this facility because the treatment's better there. The food's better. You get to go outside every day, which is wild. The treatment of a prisoner is better than what they treat veterans going through the hardest time of their lives in the United States of America. So that was pretty frustrating. And I noticed some of the drugs made me feel worse. And as soon as I tried to be resistant to the drugs at all, they would get very frustrated and really just kind of try to force them on you. I was voluntarily admitted, which meant I should have been able to go home whenever I wanted. However, that was not the case. They kept telling my family, no, we'll review the case in a few days. We think he needs to be here another couple of weeks. And before long, I got really frustrated. And I had planned an escape with some of the other people in there. And late one night, I went and I pulled the fire alarm, hoping that they would do the fire alarm. We'd all go outside, and those of us that wanted to could just scatter. I spent like a week preparing. I had gathered supplies. I had some snacks. I had warm clothes that I had kind of snuck from different places in there. And so I was ready to go. But apparently somebody had already tried that trick. So they didn't let us go outside for the fire drill. And instead, they basically put me in a room and injected me with Haldol, which made me feel like it made me feel like there were insects underneath my skin trying to crawl through my skin all across my body. I was incredibly restless. All I wanted to do was scream and yell and rip my skin off. And that was the medicine they were giving people to try to get better from trauma.
Sounds like a bad horror movie.
It was hellish in that place. And, you know, there were times I was hallucinating things and not lucid, but there were also a lot of times in there that I very clearly recall what was going on. And the very real things that were happening in there I was not imagining were unacceptable treatment. Luckily, eventually my family advocated to get me out of there, which was very difficult for them. While I was in there, they actually committed me because I had tried to set off the fire, or I had set off a fire alarm. After they had drugged me up, I was drooling on myself. They had me signing legal paperwork with no representation, with a soulless lawyer who basically signed me off as permanently mentally defective, which means I can no longer purchase a firearm. Anytime law enforcement looks up my name, I come up as if I had committed a felony. So it was pretty awful treatment, you know, to come as a veteran who worked so long and done so much to protect the civil liberties that we have as American citizens, and then to just have them sucked away just because I was trying to get mental health treatment. Anyways, I moved back with my family eventually. I spent another 6 months in that psychosis. Eventually, I started to come to, largely because I was getting outside. I was getting to see my son. I was getting sleep. And little by little, I started to come to a little bit better. But again, the VA just kept pumping me full of more drugs, and they kept pushing the Seroquel despite what had happened. And I was getting sick of that. And my mind at that point was so out of it, I had a really hard time reading. I started listening to some audiobooks because I could retain it a little bit. And it took me a long time, but I was able to get through a book called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, which is a book talking about the use of psychedelics for treating mental health conditions. And I sought out a guide, and I did a guided psilocybin retreat. And after that retreat, you know, it was like a fresh snowfall over the hill of my life. And I had just gotten into these entrenched behaviors and anger and this bitter place that I was just a shell of my old self. I was angry at my family. We were about to be divorced. I was yelling at my son. I had just become a different angry person. But because of that psilocybin, it was like a reset. And with that fresh snow on the, you know, entrenched ruts of my life, those negative emotions and behaviors, I was able to take new paths. And I also made the connection at that point that the Seroquel or quetiapine was what was causing my psychoses. And so, against the advice of the VA psychiatrist, against the advice of my own family, who all was like, no, you have mental health issues, you have to take drugs. That's the only option. And, you know, I think a lot of people have been conditioned to think like, if you're having a mental health issue and you get off your medication, that's when really bad things happen. And, you know, maybe that can be true, but if you can put other things in place and get off of the medication, at least for me, I saw a lot of benefit. And it took me months to get off of Seroquel. It was equally if difficult, if not more difficult, than getting off of all the pain medications I had withdrawn off of prior. And little by little, though, I started to get my cognitive functioning back. I was able to read again. I was laughing and smiling again. And I found an organization called Warrior Angel Foundation. And those guys brought me in like a brother. And I went down, they flew me down to Texas. And I had told a little bit about my story for a fundraiser that they were doing. And it ended up becoming very successful. Raised a bunch of money to help raise awareness and help other veterans out. Went down to Texas. I ran the 4x4x48 challenge, which is from the minds of David Goggins, which is run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours straight. And at this event, we're just an incredible assortment of human beings, veterans from all over the place. Largely, you know, there were Green Berets and SEALs and Marines and a bunch of other folks. A Navy spook was there. Guys who, you know, couldn't talk about what they did when they were in the service. Some very hush hush stuff. And these guys all had the same story that I did, which was we all had a brain injury issue. A lot of these guys are from explosion, you know, IEDs and explosive concussive forces going off, clearing buildings with grenades, you know. But we all had brain injuries, and we had all been diagnosed with PTSD. And the only option we were given through the VA was pharmaceutical medications, psych meds. And all of us had been in a really dark place because of it. A lot of guys there had issues with drug addiction and alcohol, depression and suicide, psychoses. And that was when I kind of got the good, warm and fuzzy feeling in my heart, like I'm on the right path. And because of that, I made a lot of connections with people at the event. Warrior Angel Foundation brought me in under their wing. They started me on their nutraceuticals. I got to start seeing their physician, Dr. Michael Lewis, who they did an extensive blood panel. Now, I had blood panels done at the VA, but they only look at a couple things. And honestly, they don't even compare you to your gender or your age or anything. So you don't really get anything useful out of it other than, well, your levels don't look terrible. But this blood panel I had done through Warrior Angel Foundation actually really dug deep and saw what was going on in my physiology, which when you have a brain injury, one of the most common things to happen is your hormones get all jacked up because that's controlled by your brain. And so if you can start treating the physiological symptoms of the brain injury, such as addressing hormone levels, a big part of it is getting on high levels of fish oil, which reduces inflammation in your body and your brain. And it also provides healthy fats for your brain to heal itself. And under this nutraceutical protocol and actually knowing what was going on at a physiological level, rather than just going into a psychiatrist who goes, how are you feeling? And getting the subjective nonsense, they were actually seeing what was wrong and they were actually addressing it. And for the first time, after 8.5 years, I was actually getting treated for a brain injury that had caused so much misery. And through that event, I met Jesse Gould from Heroic Hearts Project. He invited me down to Peru, where I did a week-long ayahuasca ceremony. And that was hugely eye-opening. I guess the easiest way to explain it in short is I got to see what God is, or whatever you want to call that interconnectedness of all of us. And reconnected to the world and everything around me. And I came out of that and it kind of helped heal my soul, I guess you could say. You know, the nutraceuticals and the doctors were helping to heal my brain, and the psychedelics were helping to heal my soul. And I'm not saying it's for everybody, but for me, it was largely beneficial. Defenders of Freedom invited me down to Texas, where I did a traumatic brain injury clinic.
Yep.
Resiliency Brain Clinic.
I'm on the list for those guys too.
You should definitely do it. I mean, it should be, those facilities should be at every single military base.
I
I
agree.
mean,
No, dude, I agree.
in
Actually,
2 weeks,
we have a VFW member he did Defenders of Freedom. Matt Bertrand, if you're on or if you're watching, he did that. He did that, and he wears his Defenders of Freedom hat everywhere, and he says nothing but good things. And I emailed them, and I told them when I had a free moment, and they haven't gotten back to me yet. But September, I think I'll be going down to Texas, maybe, possibly.
cool. Well, keep at it. I know that they're overwhelmed because there's just so many people that want to get help, and they're doing an awesome job at it. And I'm glad the word's getting out. But I hope more organizations like that can start popping up. And
Well,
they're
this
actually
is
trying to figure out how to get that to more people and broaden without losing the
yeah.
quality of the treatment that they do.
Well, this
Which is
is
very
I
difficult.
mean, this is great. We had Wiz talking about his experience. We have
Right.
you talking about your experience. I myself, I don't take meds anymore. I was on trazodone, mirtazapine, and citalopram for like 11 years.
Oh,
I
man.
did this thing called Save a Warrior. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
No.
They're out of Ohio and California, but it's kind of like a warrior detox for firefighters, Leos, veterans. They don't do any ayahuasca, but they do meditation, ACA, AA, equine therapy. They do like a combination. They don't get into um,
Psychedelics.
the psychedelics, but I'm hearing nothing but psychedelics in the past couple weeks. I mean, me and Fleek
Yeah.
we've heard all kinds of like good things
A lot of
coming out
great
of this.
things.
Yeah,
At first I was like, what the hell?
I know it seems really bizarre. And when I first heard about it, I was kind of like, what?
I,
But I think it's the direction that mental health is going to go because it's hugely helpful. And when
well,
you combine that with the nutraceuticals and addressing the physiological damage done to people, through the chronic combat stress, brain injury, explosions, all the things that everybody goes through. Uh, when you combine those things, it's hugely helpful. And
I
and
mean,
I
look at
see
you
tremendous
now.
improvement.
You're lucid. You're um, I mean, you're
Yeah.
intelligent.
Uh,
You're
let me
amazing.
ask, how's your relationship with your wife? Is your
Yeah.
wife
It's in a large part thank you to the ayahuasca and then the brain clinic and everything that I've been doing. It's turned our relationship around. I mean, this spring
awesome?
we were literally talking about how we're gonna do the divorce, how we're gonna work it out, and now we're back laughing, going on date nights. Romance is back. As much we
Nice.
got a newborn little girl in our house, so she takes a lot of mommy's time, but
Right.
as best we can.
Congratulations, by the way.
Yes. Yes.
Thank
Good
you.
job. That's awesome to hear.
As best we can, we're trying to get that romance back, and it's incredible to see all these nonprofits out there, be it like No Fallen Heroes and Wiz. And
No fallen heroes. That's
those
right.
guys are
Yeah.
doing good stuff. There's a ton of really good ones out there that have helped me. Operation Surf out of California. If you want to get with some vets and go surfing, those guys are
I've
awesome.
heard of them. Yeah.
Wake for Warriors. I'm actually wearing their shirt.
Oh yeah.
Those guys will take you out and take you out wake surfing. Very good vibes. A lot of vets.
The aquanauts in Florida, they take out people diving, like people that have lost limbs or have got
Cool.
PTSD. Because I'm a big scuba diver. I'm trying to get everybody in my post certified because I'm like that, like being under the water.
Yeah.
I won't jump out of a plane, but I will go down 100 feet, no problem, and have a blast.
So since we heard that story you're talking about it, I feel like we should probably share the No Fallen Hero
We
trailer.
should. I think we need to show it.
Yeah.
You're gonna love it, man. This is awesome.
I'm sure he saw it with Mr. Wiz.
It just pumps me up, man.
Lights on.
My name's Matthew Buckley. My call sign is a fighter pilot with Wiz. Served the United States Navy on active duty for 10 years and then flew fighters in the reserves for 6 years.
Being a fighter pilot for the United States Navy was the culmination of a dream. Dogfights at supersonic speed on the edge of consciousness. Life and death situations created stress, trauma, depression, anxiety, and fear. I was searching for an answer, and I found it. Shockingly, it was psychedelic medicine.
The military does an incredibly good job of training you for combat and doing some pretty horrible stuff to another human being. And then when they're done with you, they do a pretty shitty job of transitioning you back to being a human. This plant medicine has been around for thousands and thousands of years.
It took me on a journey downrange with these 4 other incredible men, human beings, veterans.
As a result of the medicine, I literally found God.
I took the ibogaine. It was like I got lifted up and then I exploded into forever. I felt infinity.
What happens in this world is beyond logic. And when these heroes move from the speed of sound to the speed of life, the job really gets dangerous because so many of their wounds are invisible. Emotions get suppressed as a means of survival.
Daniel Summers, who served 2 tours in Iraq, took his own life. He was just 30 years old.
Sadly, he is not the first veteran to do so.
8,000 U.S. veterans commit suicide each year. That's an average of 22 per day.
We're here to tell you this is not the way out.
Literally 52 years of ego, of regret, shame, pain, death, alcohol, drugs, disintegrated in the blink of an eye. I exploded into light, energy, love, indescribable.
80% of the volunteers in that study reported that the experience was among the 5 most personally meaningful and spiritually significant experiences of their lives.
It was peace. It was a peace that I have never felt before. We're going to be saving lives. We're going to be changing attitude. No higher purpose, no higher calling than helping your fellow woman, helping your fellow man.
On May 27th, with the opening of Maverick Top Gun, we step out of the cockpit into the real-life stories of decorated pilots.
We're going to heal everybody, not just veterans. Nobody's left behind.
No fallen heroes.
Damn.
That's amazing.
Damn. What do you think? What do you think, Kegan?
Yeah, that's going to be excellent. I mean, I'm really looking forward to seeing it once it's out.
You know,
Yeah,
and there's, you know, you talk about ayahuasca and he talks about ibogaine and mushrooms and how do you say that?
Psilocybin mushrooms.
Yeah, that stuff. Yeah. Sorry, I'm a recovering alcoholic, so I don't know any of that stuff anymore. I mean, maybe back in college when I did shrooms a long time ago before I joined the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
Which I didn't tell my recruiter. Sorry.
You're talking to an officer, bro.
I know, dude. Hey, listen, they were giving waivers out like crazy back then, man.
I think it's something it'd be good for more people to do, honestly.
No, and like you said, I mean, it's like AA. It's like AA is not for everybody. And that's the same thing with this mushrooms and ayahuasca, but like the combination in talking about it breaks that wall down, so people can actually be like and think and like, oh, that's outside the box. That could work.
Yeah,
I don't
and it
know.
is. I mean, there's been a lot of clinical trials going on. I know MDMA and ketamine, I believe, have been approved now for therapeutic use.
I did a lot of that in college, a lot of ecstasy, in my junior year especially.
Well, turns out it's legit, and
It is. It's pretty good. It's pretty damn legit. I'll tell you that.
They're trying to get. I think psilocybin's probably up next, and then what Wiz did is ibogaine and 5-MeO-DMT. Ibogaine is basically the same active compound that's in ayahuasca, which is what I did, and that's
is it a plant?
powerful.
It's a plant.
It's a plant.
It is. It's ayahuasca is made out of 2 plants. It's made out of ayahuasca, which is a vine that they take the bark off of, and then there's a bush called chacuna, and they mix that at about a 3-to-1 ratio in a big pot, and they cook it all day down to like this black sludge, and it's potent stuff, man.
Who comes up with this stuff?
Probably the Incans and it's probably the Incans and the Aztecs came up with that stuff.
The ones I did, it was through the Shipibo, Peruvian Shipibo, who are essentially the natives from the Amazon jungle.
Yep, that's what I heard. Yeah,
they've been doing that for
thousands of years. I mean, this goes back a long time, man. This medicine.
Where did you go to do this?
I went to Peru.
In Peru.
So I was on the western side of the Amazon rainforest.
Wow.
And it was,
Wiz went to Mexico for his.
Yeah.
Dang.
But,
hey, VA, you got to get on the same page. Come on, guys. Come on.
Yeah.
Chop, chop, chop.
Yeah, I mean, there's talk to them. A big issue, I think, with the VA right now is they're largely controlled by what the pharmaceutical industry wants, with the ties between the pharmaceutical industry and our federal government right now.
Yep.
And we can kind of see how that's been going. And I believe it's an unhealthy relationship at this point. But
yeah, I just got done watching Dope Sick on.
Oh, I was just watching that the other day with Katrina.
It is eye-opening, man. The pharma companies are rat bastards, to say the least.
Yeah.
Dope Sick. Yeah. Wait, is that wait on Netflix? Commander Fleek?
It's on Hulu.
Okay.
It's about the OxyContin.
Yeah.
The Purdue family
started
OxyContin.
Yeah, that's
Holy
right.
shit, man.
Yeah. There's a lot of money to be made.
Yeah. Well, we need to stop thinking about that and start healing people, man.
That family was banking over $1 billion a year, and it wasn't enough. And these little towns were just like begging them, stop selling that. And they're like, no, it's good. Just take more. Just take more.
Yeah.
It's like, holy shit.
Yeah,
man.
the stuff they do that I saw in the VA, they send in these pharmaceutical reps to the VA hospital when I was in Richmond at the Poly Trauma Center. And, they're these beautiful young women dressed somewhere between business casual and exotic dancer.
Nice.
Yeah.
And they chat you up and smooth you up, and they try to get you to sign up for these clinical trials. And there had been a case in Richmond, Virginia. They were trying this trial drug for spinal cord patients. So guys who had severed spinal cords that weren't going to get the function back, they had this pain medication, and they were injecting it into their doing these trials. They sent these pretty girls in to sign everybody up. And hey, if you sign up for this, I'm going to come chit chat with you every day to check and see how it's doing.
Yeah.
So guys are eager to do it. And then, all these spinal cord patients signed up, got this stuff injected into their spinal fluid, and it caused severe pain, permanent severe pain that was unescapable unless these guys were put into a comatose state. And that's how they had to live the rest of their life. And, the pharmaceutical company said it was like a contaminated batch and blah, blah, blah. But who knows?
Yeah.
They're experimenting on veterans like guinea pigs.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
And what helped me the most for pain management when I was in the VA hospital is a guy came into my room, wasn't wearing any official documentation, just a guy said, hey, do you want to try prolotherapy? I said, I'll try anything if you think, because at the time I had severe nerve pain in my left leg. one minute it felt like someone was crushing my toes with a wrench. The next, it felt like somebody was stabbing me or lighting it on fire. And that was going on and off all day, all night. It made it very difficult to sleep. And he came in, he had a syringe and he had a bag of glucose. So sugar water, essentially. Filled that syringe up, and then he just injected it subcutaneously all around little pockets on my leg and foot. And within 10 minutes, 90% of that pain was gone and it never came back. And it was just sugar water.
What?
Yeah. It somehow calmed all those nerves that were freaking out and had lasting effects. It didn't involve pharmaceutical drugs at all, you know. There's just so much else out there that's hugely beneficial. And if for anybody out there who's watching who thinks that they're just going to be stuck taking a bunch of drugs the rest of their life, it doesn't have to be like that. But you do have to take control of your health. It's more, you're not going to just find a pill, and there's no easy solution. You gotta change.
Totally agree.
Yeah, you gotta work it.
It's up to you,
Totally
because
agree.
no one's going to do it for you.
No, you have to do that. You have to accept, and you have to be honest with yourself and ask for help and get it done, because nobody else is going to do it for you except for yourself.
I had a question for you about an hour ago when you started, but I didn't want to interrupt you because the story was so amazing.
No, that story was pretty damn good.
So
nice.
when you were with your skipper when it happened, right? Or the commander?
Right.
So you said he dropped a marker. Is that a physical marker, or was it like an electronic marker?
No.
What is it?
So it's essentially you hit one of the push tiles that are on the panel of the jet, and wherever you're at, it records that GPS location, and it gives it to you in a detailed Latin long. And that way you can pass that specific Latin long to other, you can pass it to ATC, who can pass it to other aircraft, pass it to any rescue aircraft coming in, any rescue vessels from the Coast Guard, you know. So it's just a lat long, essentially, that he recorded and was able to share.
I got you. Interesting.
Dude, you have an amazing story, man. Man.
When you ejected, where does the seat go? Does the seat go with you?
Yeah, so initially you ride the seat. In my case, for a very short period of time. Depending on the altitude, you ride it for a little longer. But in my case, I basically wham, bam, I was out of the jet, my parachute opened, and I disconnected from the seat. So you separate. And for me, it all happened very rapidly. But you do separate from the seat before you hopefully hit the ground.
Right. So I was on an aircraft carrier, the USS Carl Vinson. I was the air boss's yeoman. And I witnessed a couple ejections. Like one of them on the flight deck, he lost his the fluid that stopped.
Hydraulic fluid.
Yeah, there you go. He lost hydraulic fluid, and he was just heading towards the edge, and he ejected, and he was just coasting. Like, I couldn't imagine the ejection that you went through.
Yeah, I mean, just a regular ejection. I think for the NACE's seat that I was using, it's a Martin Baker ejection seat. I think they say instantaneous G as that rocket booster ignites is about 50 Gs. And then you sustain about 14 Gs as you come out. So, I mean, 50 Gs would kill you if it was more than a split second, but that's a brutal force that just crushes your spine, you know? And that's in a normal ejection, but it's gotta be that quick, because at least the NACE's ejection seat that we had in the Super Hornet gets you out in less than a half a second. In 0.4 seconds, you're completely clear of the aircraft from the time you pull that handle. So it's violent, but time is life in that case. Which
I was in the passageway when they brought that pilot through, because, you know, obviously the helicopters went out and picked him up, and I was in the passageway when medical brought him through, and I remember vividly looking at his face when he walked by. His eyeballs were black. I was like, "Whoa, what the?"
Yeah, my face was all swollen up. I mean, it looked like I had gotten in a boxing match for 15 rounds and lost, because my face was just battered, swollen up real big.
Yeah, I can imagine. Man. And then I think I probably would have had a heart attack just floating around in the Atlantic Ocean itself. just that alone, I wouldn't have been able to
Yeah,
handle. Let alone the
with a 16-foot
eject-
shark underneath you. Yeah, that's pretty fucking scary.
Luckily, Mary Lee wasn't hungry for me that day, and I later learned that a lot of sharks are repelled from the smell of our blood. It doesn't actually attract them.
Jaws just lied to us.
But at the time, I
That
was
movie
like,
lied to us.
I'm for sure gonna get eaten right now.
I think Shark Week starts today.
It
right?
yeah. Hey,
See?
it's coming soon. It's coming soon, man. I think I think it's Monday, maybe.
You're kicking off Shark Week for us.
Yeah, I gotta give those guys a call. Maybe I can get on their show.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh man, that's amazing. Well, I'm like super happy for you that
Yeah, me too, man.
you're good today, and you and your wife are good, and your kids are good. That's awesome.
And this is a great story that needs to be recorded, and I'm glad we got it. And you are something special, sir. I'll tell you that.
Thank you, guys.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
thanks for having me on and giving me a chance to talk about this. And
So
I hope
what town?
this one guy can hear this, that maybe it helps him.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody will definitely hear it. I guarantee you, because we get messages all the time. Hey, thanks for that story, man. I was in Fallujah or Ramadi or whatever that story was. I was there, and I really needed to hear that. So it happens all the time.
Oh wow, I was in both of those places.
Yeah, it's probably when we're talking about you, some people are just randomly.
I know they'll come and
message.
they'll yeah.
It's like it's amazing. I love it. But Northern, are you actually in Traverse City?
Just outside, kind of on the outskirts of it.
Me and my son went up there salmon fishing a couple of years ago, and we caught some monsters up there in the rivers, man.
Oh yeah.
Do you salmon fish?
So yeah, when I was a kid, actually, I lived in Acme, which is right on the east side of Traverse City, and right behind our house was a creek, and in that creek in the fall, all the spawning salmon would swim up these creeks. And so as a little kid, I would go down there and I was grabbing these just massive salmon with my bare hands, that was really cool. But I've been salmon fishing too, and they fight incredibly strong, man. That's a fun fish to catch.
It is,
and,
man. That's amazing.
Really great to eat too.
Yeah.
Well, Kegan, if you ever find yourself in Tennessee, definitely you got a place, either at Fleek's or at my house.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And we'll take you out for barbecue or whatever, or take you down to Nashville and we can laugh at all the silly people down there. It'd be fun.
Have you ever been to Nashville?
I've only been there very briefly. When I was doing that corporate flying gig, I got to stay there, but I only got to stay one evening, and I couldn't do anything fun because I had to fly early. But
who'd you fly for, corporate wise?
It was called Poneman Institute. It was a privacy research and consulting firm, which was actually really interesting work, getting to be a fly on the wall in some of the meetings I got to go to, talking about privacy. Basically go to all these big tech companies and big Fortune 500 companies and review their privacy policies. But I learned kind of the scary dark world of privacy back then, which is like basically Google can collect all of your information and knows everything about you, and all the data mining and the coordination with government agencies.
Google already told me that I'm going to die at 62. I asked that question and they said 62. I'm like, damn, man, I've got like 18 years to go and I'm done. I better live it.
Yeah. I wonder how they came up with that.
I don't know, because I can't ask Google anymore because that's
well, that was when you're drinking. You were drinking back then. Now you're sober, so.
Actually, dude, this was 2 years ago, man. I'm 4 years sober in July 31st. So I was sober when Google told me when I was going to die.
Yeah, so we are like 30 miles south of Nashville. So if you ever come down this way, give us a
you're always invited, man. Bring the family.
We'd love to show you the ropes.
Yeah.
Have you come to our post and talk to our guys?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Commander Fleek is a great cook. He's got like a Traeger. He's got this. He's got this. They call him Squidly because what's Squidly cooking today? And he's cooking eggs. He's putting pancakes on his damn Blackstone, whatever, like outside. I'm like, dude, you don't cook pancakes outside. And he does it. And they look amazing. I haven't had them yet.
Yeah. My wife always gets mad at me because I'm always buying grills.
Hey, you've got
I heard
a
those Traegers
plethora.
are sweet though.
Yeah, I have pellet grills. I have kettles, flat tops. I have gasser. I got a little bit of everything.
You got everything, man. But hey,
you name it, I'll cook it for you.
Hey Kegan, it's been an honor, man. I know you probably got to get back with your family.
Yeah,
I know I do.
We gotta get you inside before the bears come out.
Yeah, beware the bears.
There's literally bears in this area. I guarantee you.
If you get eaten by a bear, that's a cool obituary, at least.
Well, first of all, hey, that would be a badass obituary. Like, first the man ejected from the speed of sound, and then he got ate by a bear.
Then he got ate by a bear.
Hey, I'd sign off that way. That'd be all right.
He lived a good life, and then a bear just ate him. But hey, thanks, man.
Yes,
Commander Fleek, awesome
Lieutenant,
job tonight.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your story with us. Yeah, we appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And you take care of yourself. And if you need anything, you know where we're at.
All right, thanks, guys.
Yes, sir.
Hoorah, sir.